Okay, Kevin, let's go ahead and get started with your movement teardown. Nice kanji day wheel. Pretty flat. Got a little bit of a bend there, but I think it's going to be okay. A few hairs to deal with, but looks good. Okay. Quite a bit of oil on your movement. So what's interesting about these 6138 versus the other 6000 series from the normal Seiko line is that they all came with this jeweled lower mainspring arbor port here, and that was because this is actually a plate that sits above the main plate of the watch, and there's a gear that engages your hour recording wheel, and in order to keep that in good check, Seiko realized that they needed to actually have a jewel here for that post. So that is a feature of these that sets them apart from the others in the 6000 series. Most 6000 series need a jewel in that spot simply because the brass main plate gets so worn down over the years. And so that is a important component. There's your date change. The interesting thing about these movements is that they have a bit of a hybrid of things on this calendar plate and things below, which usually sit on the normal calendar side. Now we can take off this upper plate and expose your components, but what I'm going to do first is break down your train side and then come back to the calendar side. Okay, let's go ahead and take this shock jewel out. Alright, and let's remove your balance assembly. Take a much closer look at that as we go. Make sure everything's flat. Sometimes these need a little bit of adjustment, and it's a fairly tedious process of ensuring that the balance and the hairspring are both in plane and not cupped in any way or not bent. Unfortunately, sometimes when amateur, more amateur than me, watchmakers or just people who really don't know, sometimes they'll actually grab a hold of the balance wheel in order to get the movement out of the watch, and that is a super big no-no, simply because it bends that balance wheel, which sends your watch into the realm of the non-working. And so try and avoid any shocks to this, any bends, any issues. Just so gently take this out, put it aside. All right, now we can take your upper plate off. This controls the location of your minute recording wheels and your upper component, upper jewel, for the fourth wheel, which is also your the wheel that controls the chronograph function of the watch. So that's a very important component, and we have to check it to make sure that it is in proper functioning order. There's a couple things that can fail with those, and they are pretty susceptible to use. If you are really careful with it, you can ensure that it has a nice long life. And the way you do that is something I'll explain as we get the watch back together. But it essentially means that you don't want to reset the chronograph in a position that's far away from the 12 o'clock position or the straight up and down, just because it means a lot of torque, a lot of travel, a lot of impulse force that gets put onto the chronograph wheel and your hands and all of those things. It's good to see that this is together. Sometimes these need to be restaked. This is your minute recording wheel. Sorry for the noise. We've got cleaning going on in the house at the moment. Alright, so these springs control these levers. So I got two of these. One for the reset lever here. And this one controls your hammer. Make sure these don't go flying to the other side of the room. There we go. And there's your reset hammer. Got quite a bit of oil on these components. To check the surfaces here, make sure there's no gouges or issues. But these are your resetting positions. These flats reset your chronograph wheel and your minute recording wheel simultaneously. Alrighty, let's go ahead and take your operating levers off. And your column wheel. Screws off. Quite a bit of oil here. Somebody was very generous with the lubricant at some point. Sorry again about the noise. Let's go ahead and take this off. And this has a very important washer spacer down below, bushing effectively. Cared for. Don't want to lose that. Okay. Take your levers off. There we go. Whew. You can just see the oil sort of piled up here. Little cover here. Also serves as a bushing for the lower intermediate wheel. Over top of your other jewels. Need to be lubricated. there's your jewel for your let's see, this jewel is for the escape wheel, and this jewel is for the third wheel. A lot of the 6309, or I'm sorry, 6139 chronograph movements have a bushing here instead of a jewel. So it's another feature of these. All right, let's take off your ratchet wheel. Okay, let's take off this click spring. These all go in the cleaner. All right, now we can take off this one of many plates on your watch. This one retains your drive train, your train of wheels. Lots of screws to keep track of. Luckily, Seiko was pretty good about the consistency in their design and the way they use different screws on different movements. Okay, get this lifted off here, and there we have it. There's your winding. Super generous with the oil. Okay, get that bridge cleaned up. Alrighty, well, looking pretty good so far. Here's your all important, super important chronograph wheel. We'll do a little resistance check here. Oh yeah, that's in good shape. Looks like it's nice and flat. That is good news. That is a make or break for a movement of this type. They are a bit fragile, and all of them are extremely old because I haven't made them in 35 years. There's your mainspring arbor. We'll get that opened up and check your mainspring. Here is your center wheel cock. This goes here. Take out your pallet fork. Another thing we have to take a pretty close look at. Make sure it's in good shape. They can wear over time and lead to issues of wear on the jewels. You wouldn't think the jewels would wear out, but if they're used for years and years and years, they can get a bit of a furrow in the jewel surface. Put that in there. Take a very close look at the reflections on these jewel surfaces. Sorry for the noise. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Alright, here we go. Let's get your escape wheel. Lovely. Alrighty. And we're not going to be able to take that off because we still have your cannon pinion on your other side. But overall, looking pretty good. Go ahead and take out your stem. Get that looked at and cleaned up, taken care of. pinion. Okay, so that's the train side disassembled. Let's go back to your extra plate for your 24-hour mechanism, or 12-hour mechanism for the chronograph. Sorry about that. So this is where these are 3 unique screws to this movement. These sort of rounded head, longer length screws. This is the one place where these are installed. And this holds this plate on, calendar plate. There we go. Okay, now we will have this plate off and expose your hour wheel components and your keyless works. So you have a couple springs here. You have your reset spring for your hammer on your 12-hour wheel or your hour wheel. That will come out. And then this spring, which is in a different position than it normally should be in. This should be aligned to point to this center, so I'm going to have to adjust that. And then you have your cannon pinion and other components that make up both the calendar works and the components that hold your hands in place. So we're going to gently deal with this. There we go. Okay. And we're going to take these springs apart. Got to be a little gentle with these. They can go off to the moon if you're not careful. Make sure everything comes off well. Very, very light components. They're super thin and super long, so you have to make sure you don't do damage, bend them or anything. They're on these eccentric mounts, which makes it a bit of a challenge to pull directly off there. A bit fiddly. There we go. Alright, that's one. And this one needs to pop off. Luckily they give you a little handle here. And then this one, which looks like a Kokopelli, little dancing guy. Resistance wheel here, or resistance for your hour hand, hour wheel. Make sure that gets nice and clean. Okay, and what's left are the components that quick date change and your keyless works. Go ahead and remove your cannon pinion, which is going to release your center wheel. Okay, so that's good. Center wheel looks good. Alright, now a couple more pieces here. bent sometimes. They're not installed properly. Alright, here, quick date change. Comes off. There's a little spring underneath of this plate. Gotta be a little bit careful with. They're on the tight side. There we go. Alrighty. Very good. Alright, last couple pieces. There's your spring. And your lever. And there's your... Ooh, it's got quite a bit of grease. We'll get that cleaned up. Now we just need to take these last two little pieces off. Here's your spring, we gotta be careful with. Clean that. And your lower die shock setting. Make sure that gets put here. Alright, so no surprises, no drama. Everything looks good. It's really clean. You know, I have to say, this has a really nice, what I would call bones. They are, you know, this is a good movement to start with. It's super clean. I mean, clearly somebody has done some servicing on this movement at some point. You can tell it's been cleaned, but it's got a lot of oil residue left on it, which is okay. I mean, that can be a problem over time as oils migrate. They can tend to get on your mainspring. I'm sorry, your hairspring, and that can lead to issues of timing. So, you know, it's that kind of thing where less can often be more when it comes to lubrication, just to save the heartache of having the lubrication go to places it shouldn't. So we tend to limit the magnitude of oil that we do put on simply for that reason. Okay, let's get this into the cleaner and start thinking about going in the other direction, back together. It's looking good though. This is a really nice movement. All right.